Hey nerds, what's up? Today I wanted to talk about a new sci-fi read, Voidverse by Damien Ober, that I read and loved. I ended up giving this book a 4.5 out of 5, which you guys know I don't give out willy-nilly. I really loved it. I was actually sent this as an ARC from Saga Press. I ended up finishing it on the day it released, so it wasn't super early. It's out now. But I got sent it from them, and I don't actually accept a lot of ARCs, especially like this. I only ever accept ARCs I'm going to read, and because I don't read as quickly as a lot of my other contemporaries on here, I generally stick to ARCs from authors I already know or books I'm already planning on reading. So this was really unusual for me, but when they offered it, I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to read more sci-fi. Why not? Let's try it out. And I just loved it. So I finished it and I was so excited and I went online, and then it was like, had barely any reviews comparatively to other ARCs I generally read. It had like 30 something reviews on Goodreads, none on Amazon, and the Goodreads rating was pretty low for Goodreads. I realize this is not a low rating, but like for the way Goodreads is, this is low. And I was like, okay, maybe this book is a little bit like one of my other books that I love, This Is How You Lose the Time War, where you kind of either really like it or you completely bounce off it. So I really wanted to make a video today talking about this book and helping it find its right audience, because I like it so much, I want to get it into the hands of other people who will like it. So I'm going to talk about what it's about, what I liked about it, and then I'm also going to have a section of like, hey, if you don't like these things, you will probably bounce off this book. Fair warning. So yeah, my goal is to get other people to read Voidverse and like it as well, because I enjoyed it so much. So Voidverse is about a world where there are a lot of floating rocks or floating islands in the middle of this vast void. And these floating rocks and islands usually aren't super big. And so you have a lot of these really isolated communities. And people can go out and ride the void, as people call it, but it's very dangerous and often difficult to do, especially because you don't always know where the other rocks are unless you have a specialized map. So most people kind of stick to their island. And these islands just go straight out into the void, so you could stand on the edge and just look into this vast void. And so you have this very creepy, kind of dystopian universe where communities are isolated and they're small. And because of that, a lot of individual kind of myth, religion, and ideas can grow relatively close together. This story is told in 6 parts, and for many of the parts, the story switches to a new perspective and a new person who has had different experiences or lives in a different place within the void. And through that, we kind of get a fuller picture of different living experiences within the void and kind of a big event that is happening in this universe, and what's changing for the void and kind of consequences for everybody, even if they don't necessarily know it. That's all I'm gonna say, because I do feel like this book is a very vibe heavy book. That's why I was drawn in so much. And I'm very grateful I knew literally nothing about this. Like, I think I read their description on the email months ago and then didn't remember it, didn't even go in and read the back. I just started it. And I love doing that with books. And I think this book was a perfect way to do it. I do wanna say that this is listed as sci-fi, but to me, it reads a lot more sci-fantasy. And I obviously enjoyed that because I do kind of like that mixture of genres. So why I loved it. Like I said, I was immediately taken in by the atmosphere of this novel. Like from page 3, I was all about the vibes. I really felt this idea of the starkness of the world he created, because it is quite creepy. And I feel like they do a really good job of kind of creating that starkness of what this world would be like and how cold it would be and how isolated it would be. And I really felt that heavily and just was taken in by that world. It felt very unique and very different from anything I'd read before. Now, one thing I kind of ruined in my description, but I feel like I had to talk about it if I'm doing a review, is I was initially very surprised by the perspective shifts. I was not expecting, when I got to a new part, to completely go into this different spot in the void, to completely hear from another person. And that took me by surprise in the best way. I was invested in this part of the story, and then suddenly I'm over here, but I realize how it's connecting over to this other person. And so I really enjoyed that method of storytelling. I thought it was actually pretty unique. It made the book feel, it felt different. It's a different method of storytelling than a lot of more traditional books that I read, and especially how all of the stories weave together from knowledge that the reader has that maybe our characters don't have, or from actually crossing paths, ended up being really satisfactory for me. Mostly this book just made me think a lot. I feel like this is a book that doesn't tell you what it's trying to do, which you guys know that I love. I love a book that isn't telling me anything and they just kind of present stuff. And so I was just constantly thinking about it. The first thing is you have these really isolated islands. And so as I said before, each of these islands kind of creates their own mythos, their own religions, their own thoughts. And being able to get a sense of a lot of different islands' beliefs and thoughts, I thought had a lot of really interesting things to say about how beliefs are formed and how they might affect a person. And when that person has the ability to leave and have something that challenges their beliefs and how they deal with that, I just thought it was done in a very interesting way. And again, this is all subtext. They're not always, I mean, sometimes they obviously tell you, but it's not always there on the surface. And so I just found myself contemplating a lot about why people living in this society would create the beliefs they had, and especially seeing how beliefs differed when they were technically close together, but that the void created a more vast distance. I just thought it was really interesting, and how knowledge would form and travel in a society like that. I also think when you're reading this book, it's hard not to engage with the thought of like, who would I be in this society? Would I be the person who stayed on the island, or would I be the person who risked the void and wanted to know what was out there enough to do that? And for me, I think the answer sadly was like, I don't think I could. Like when they describe, the way it's described how you would go into the void, I don't think a lot of us would. I think we want to be that person, but I had to be honest with myself. And that also kind of just made me think a lot about how I interact with my world here. And that sounds a little silly, but I think this was one of the books that was kind of easier to try to imagine yourself in this world and what your existence would be like and what would you choose. And I always kind of like when a book makes you engage with it in that way. I also think there was a lot of interesting exploration of relationships versus goals, or relationships versus belief, and how our decisions affect relationships and our core beliefs and what we will give up to accomplish those. And I thought a lot about that after I finished reading as well. I also really love the unusual story structure. I think the way it's put into parts and the way characters come in and out of the story is pretty unique, like I said, and it really gave it a fairy tale-like vibe. To me personally, this book has a lot about atmosphere and vibes and thematic elements, and I love that kind of book, and I also think it was the perfect length for that kind of book. It is pretty short. I think it's under 320 pages, so it almost felt kind of like a novella. I know that's not a novella. That's a crazy thing to say, but I'm saying it was the perfect length for that kind of more abstract fairy tale kind of exploration where it's not long enough to get sick of the world. It's the perfect amount of time to kind of explore this setting and the plot that's happening within the characters. Overall, I just thought it was a very lovely story and I was really invested in it. Now, let's talk about why you may bounce off. I just spent a lot of time saying how much I love it, but based on kind of reading this and reviews, I think I have a couple ideas of like why you might not be a good reader for this. First, the characters are extremely high-level characters. They are characters that represent more ideas for the story than something kind of like a deep character introspective dive. So if that's really important for you, I think you wouldn't love this novel. Now, you guys know I'm a character reader, so that might be surprising, but I don't mind sometimes if a character represents an idea instead. Something that kind of reminded me of is how I talk about the characters in Remembrance of Earth's Paths, which is The Three-Body Problem is the first book in that by Cixin Liu. That's kind of the same similar vibe where those characters represent more ideas than maybe fully fleshed people that feel like super real. That being said, I connected a lot to these characters. I felt for them a lot, but it is more high level. It's not like Robin Hobb, right? It's not these deep character studies. It's more high level. It's more thematic elements that are explored through each individual character. That doesn't mean you're not going to care about them. Just like I cared about characters in Three-Body Problem. It's just like a slightly different experience. This story is ambiguous. It's very ambiguous, and if you don't like ambiguous endings or ambiguous plot lines, you will not like this novel. I have to give that, like that might feel a little bit spoilerish if you're like, oh wow, the ending's ambiguous. It's ambiguous, and I feel like you need to know that going in. Because you might bounce off of it otherwise. It's a strange story. I say that with the utmost positivity because I loved it and I like a strange story. But it's very unusual and it doesn't follow your typical conventions of what you think of maybe a typical fantasy or sci-fi. I will say I do think sci-fi is often more experimental in that way. That's just my opinion. But this feels a little experimental. So if you tend to bounce off those kind of stories, again, this probably isn't for you. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight this because I really, really enjoyed it. I actually should say it's a really pretty book, huh? This is just the standard copy. Who was I? I was talking to someone recently. I guess I shouldn't call them out just in case it's not real, but they were saying Saga is just doing this more often now, that their just regular versions are just a little bit more elevated. I don't know if that's actually true, but I've noticed that with some of their stuff. I'm pretty sure this is just the regular copy, so it's kind of cool. The cover is like the triangle, and it has like an image on it, painted edges. That really has nothing to do with the contents of the story, but I did want to call it out. I really liked this. I'm still thinking about it. I highly enjoyed it. I want to get this in the right hands of people because when I enjoy a book, you guys know I like to go hard for it. So I hope if this sounds interesting to you, you'll give it a try. And I hope I also maybe convince some people who would bounce off of it not to read it because it's like, you know, you always want books to find the right audience for it. Yeah, okay, that's it. If you like these kind of videos, please like and subscribe. That's the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading as well as other nerdy rants, as well as currently doing In the Dark reviews for One Piece Season 2. Yes, I am obviously watching. People have been asking. That is also over on my Instagram. You can follow me there at bookborn.reviews. Okay, I'll see you next time. Bye.